8 years. That's how long I've lived in this house. Same walls, same creaky stairs, same quiet neighborhood. It's a regular, family-sized place. The kind of house that makes sense when you've got roommates filling the rooms with noise and movement. And for a while, I did. But once they moved out, it was just me, rattling around in a space way too big for one person. It's technically a 4-bedroom house, but I only really live in 2 of them. One is my bedroom, where I sleep, scroll, and exist like a normal human being. The second one is my gaming room. That's my sanctuary. LED lights, big monitor, headset hanging on the wall. That room feels alive. The other 2 bedrooms? They're all the way down the hall upstairs, almost forgotten. One of them has a few dusty storage boxes shoved in the corner. The other is completely empty. No furniture, no decorations, just bare carpet and blank walls. I haven't stepped into that one in months. A few nights ago, I got off work around 9 p.m. I was tired, hungry, and not in the mood to cook, so I grabbed Wendy's on the way home. Nothing special, just a routine night. I walked in, tossed my keys on the counter, and headed straight to the game room with my food. I had the next day off, which, to me, meant one thing: stay up all night gaming. I shut the door, put on my headset, booted up my PC, and loaded into COD. The familiar menu music started playing through my headphones, and I was just about to cue into a match when I heard it. A faint sound. It was quick, subtle, almost like someone knocking at the front door. I froze. I slowly slid one side of my headset off and held my breath, listening carefully. The house was silent. No second knock. No movement. Nothing. I waited maybe 15 seconds, staring at my closed door, expecting it to happen again. But it didn't. I figured if someone was actually at the door, they'd knock twice. Maybe it was just the house settling. Old wood makes weird noises. That's what I told myself. So I shrugged it off and went back to my game. About 2 hours passed. I was deep into it, fully locked in, talking to teammates, completely distracted. Then it happened again. This time, it sounded different. Not exactly a knock, more like something closing, a door? Maybe. It was hard to tell through the headset and the in-game noise. But it was real enough that my stomach tightened. I pulled my headset off completely. Silence. The kind of silence that feels thick. I stood up slowly and opened my bedroom door. The hallway outside was dim, lit only by the faint yellow glow from the stairway light downstairs. The 2 unused rooms sat at the far end of the hall, doors closed, looking darker than usual. I just stood there, listening, waiting. Part of me expected to hear footsteps or another knock, or something shifting. But after about a minute of nothing, I convinced myself again that it was probably nothing. Maybe the air conditioner kicking on. Maybe a random noise from outside. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. So I walked downstairs. Each step creaked louder than it ever had before. When I reached the front door, I looked through the peephole first. The porch was empty. No movement. No shadows. I unlocked the door and opened it slightly, scanning the driveway and the street. Nobody. Everything looked completely normal. But hearing those sounds twice, that wasn't normal. Before heading back upstairs, I double-checked the deadbolt. Then I checked it again. I even tested the handle just to be sure. Locked. Secure. At least, that's what I thought. And with that uneasy feeling sitting in the back of my mind, I went back upstairs, telling myself it was nothing. But something didn't feel right anymore. This time, I decided not to brush it off so easily. If there was a sound, I wanted to hear it clearly. So instead of shutting myself inside the gaming room like usual, I left the door wide open. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dim and quiet. From my chair, I could see straight down toward the 2 spare bedrooms at the end. I figured if anything moved out there, I'd notice. I'd put my headset back on, though I kept the volume slightly lower this time. Enough to play, not enough to drown out the house. Then I queued into another match. About 20 minutes passed, a full round. Gunfire, callouts, the usual chaos in my ears. For a while, I forgot about the weird noises completely. I even leaned back in my chair when the match ended, stretching my arms and letting out a long breath. And that's when it happened. Out of the corner of my eye, just barely within my peripheral vision, something moved. Fast. A shape. A figure. It rushed past my open doorway. Not a shadow. Not a trick of light. A person-sized figure. My brain didn't even process it at first. I just reacted. I ripped my headset off so hard, it almost hit the floor and shot up out of my chair. So quickly, it rolled back into the desk. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the hallway. The doorway was empty now. Nothing there, but I knew what I saw. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to either run or fight, but I couldn't move. I was completely locked in place, staring into that dim hallway, expecting the figure to step back into view at any second. Seconds stretched into minutes. It felt like forever before I finally forced myself to move. Step by step, I walked toward the door. My breathing was shallow. My hands were shaking. I leaned out into the hallway and looked left, then right. Empty. The spare bedrooms at the end of the hall were closed, just like before. I checked them first. The storage room looked the same. Boxes stacked in the corner, nothing disturbed. Then I walked to the completely empty room. I pushed the door open slowly. Still empty. Bare carpet, blank walls. No movement. I checked the bathroom, the closets, every corner upstairs. Nothing. Trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, I made my way downstairs to check the front door again. And that's when my stomach dropped. The door was unlocked. I know I locked it. I checked it twice. I remember turning the deadbolt and testing the handle. But now it wasn't locked anymore. At that point, I didn't hesitate. I called the police. When they arrived and searched the house properly, way more thoroughly than I ever had, they found signs that someone had been staying in the empty room at the end of the hall. Not just hiding, living. There were small traces I'd never noticed, subtle signs. Subtle signs. Enough to make it clear that someone had been in my house regularly without me knowing. I hadn't stepped into that empty room in weeks, maybe even months, which means all that time. While I was sleeping, gaming, showering, someone could have been right there, on the other side of the wall, listening, waiting for me to leave, moving around when I had my headset on. The knocks, the sounds, the unlocked door. It all made sense. And the worst part? If I had reacted faster, if I had run into that hallway the second I saw him, there's no telling what would have happened. I don't know who he was. I don't know what he wanted. But knowing that someone was inside my house, living just feet away from me, without me ever realizing it, that's something I'll never be able to forget. This happened a little over a year ago, and even now, thinking about it makes my chest tighten. I'm 24, and I live alone in a townhouse out in the suburbs. It's quiet out here, almost too quiet sometimes. No city noise, no constant traffic. Just rows of similar houses and long stretches of stillness at night. Living alone sounds great in theory. Freedom, privacy, your own space. But honestly, it gets lonely. That's why I always try to have friends over whenever I can. My closest friends practically treat my place like a second home. A couple of them still live with their parents, so they come by a few times a week to hang out, sometimes even crash for the night. A lot of them have spare keys, just in case they ever need somewhere to go. On this particular night, though, I didn't have any plans. It was just me. The only thing I was really looking forward to was the next day. My friend Sarah was coming over for a movie night. Snacks, blankets, probably staying up way too late laughing at bad horror films. I remember just wanting this night to pass, so tomorrow would get here faster. I went to bed early, around 9:15. I brushed my teeth, locked up like usual, and crawled into bed. The house felt normal, quiet. At some point in the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up. Not slowly, not groggy. I snapped awake. My eyes opened and I was instantly alert, like someone had shaken me. My heart was racing so hard I could feel it in my throat. For a second, I didn't know why. I stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what pulled me out of sleep like that. I turned my head toward my nightstand. 2 a.m. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the clock. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was just a bad dream. Sometimes your body reacts before your brain catches up. But then I heard it. A small click. It came from downstairs. Not loud, but clear enough in the silence of the night. I slowly pushed myself up in bed, holding my breath. A second later, I heard it again. The soft, unmistakable sound of a door opening. The hinges made a faint, dragging creak as it slowly moved. And then, footsteps. Someone was walking inside my house. Each step was slow, measured, not rushed, not stumbling, just walking. My stomach dropped, but even through the fear, my brain tried to rationalize it. It had to be Sarah, or one of my other friends. They all had keys. Maybe someone had a fight at home. Maybe someone just needed a place to stay. It wouldn't be the first time. Still, 2 a.m. with no warning? That wasn't normal. I slid out of bed, my legs feeling weak, and quietly walked to my bedroom door. I opened it slowly and stepped into the hallway, peering over the railing that overlooked the downstairs area. "Sarah?" I called out softly. No answer. The house felt heavy. I stood there, frozen, listening for a response. I could hear faint movement below me, but no voice. No explanation. Then suddenly, the downstairs lights flicked on. The brightness flooded up the staircase, forcing my eyes to squint. My heart jumped again, and just a second after that, I heard the TV turn on. That familiar electronic hum. Then the soft chatter of whatever channel it landed on. For a split second, relief washed over me. Okay, it had to be one of my friends. Who else would casually walk in at 2 a.m., turn on the lights, and start watching TV like they owned the place? I even let out a small breath, convincing myself that someone had probably had too much to drink and decided my house was their safe haven for the night. But something still felt off, and I was about to find out just how wrong my first assumption was. I slowly made my way down the stairs, trying to convince myself everything was fine. Each step felt heavier than the last. The TV was definitely on. I could hear voices clearly now. Some late-night show playing at a low volume. The lights downstairs were fully on, casting an almost normal, everyday glow across the living room. And for half a second, I actually expected to see Sarah sitting there. But the moment I stepped into the living room, my entire body went cold. Not nervous, not startled, cold. There was a man sitting on my couch. Not someone I recognized. Not anyone I had ever seen before. He looked like he was in his late 40s or early 50s. His hair was long, black, and uneven, like it hadn't been cut or washed properly in a long time. His clothes were dirty, worn down, hanging loosely on him. He looked like he didn't belong anywhere near my house. And yet, there he was, just sitting there, watching TV, like he lived there. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. I couldn't even breathe. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Then he slowly turned his head and looked directly at me. Our eyes locked, and he smiled. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't embarrassed. It wasn't startled. It was crooked, calm, almost amused. And then, as if this were completely normal, he lifted his hand and gave a small wave. Not just a wave, a gesture, like he was inviting me to come sit next to him. That snapped me out of whatever frozen state I was in. I didn't scream. I didn't say anything. I turned around and ran. I bolted straight for the front door, yanked it open, and sprinted outside barefoot. I didn't even remember unlocking it. I just remember the cold night air hitting my face as I ran across the small patch of lawn to my neighbor's house. I pounded on their door harder than I ever have in my life. Over and over. When they finally opened it, I could barely form words. I was shaking, trying to explain that there was a man inside my house. A stranger, on my couch. They let me in immediately and called the police. Those few minutes waiting felt endless. I kept imagining him walking out of my house. Or worse, coming toward the neighbor's place. When the police finally arrived and went inside to check, my heart was racing all over again. But he was gone. Completely gone. No one inside. No sign of forced entry. No trace that anyone had even been there. It was like he had vanished. And somehow, that made it worse. What frustrated me even more was how lightly it was treated. The officers suggested it was probably just a homeless man looking for somewhere warm to sleep. They said sometimes that happens. They tried to reassure me that it likely wasn't personal. But that explanation never sat right with me. He didn't just wander in. My door had been locked, which means he either had tools or experience. He didn't act confused or panicked when he saw me. He didn't jump up and apologize. He smiled. He invited me to sit down next to him, like he was expecting me. And that's what keeps me up at night. The thought that maybe it wasn't random. Maybe he knew I lived alone. Maybe he'd been watching. Even now, over a year later, I struggle to sleep without checking every lock multiple times. Sometimes I wake up at random hours, heart racing, convinced I heard something downstairs. Because once you've stood in your own living room and locked eyes with a stranger who shouldn't be there, it's hard to ever truly feel alone again. And sometimes that's the scariest part, wondering if maybe you aren't. I live in a rental house with my friend Derek. Now Derek, he's the social one. Always out somewhere, clubs, parties, after parties. Half the time he doesn't even come home until the sun's up, and sometimes he just crashes at someone else's place. So even though we technically share the house, there are a lot of nights when it feels like I live there alone. This was one of those nights. Derek had texted earlier saying he'd be out late, probably at some club downtown, so I figured I'd just relax. The weather was perfect, warm but not humid, and the neighborhood was unusually quiet. It was just before midnight, the kind of calm where you can hear the faint hum of distant traffic but nothing else. I grabbed a couple cans of beer from the fridge and went out to the front porch. We had this old wooden swinging bench set up out there, the kind that creaks a little when you move. I sat down, cracked open a can, and just let the night settle in around me. Most houses on the street were dark, porch lights off, curtains drawn, everyone asleep. It was peaceful. I'd been sitting there for maybe 45 minutes when I noticed someone walking down the street. At first, I didn't think much of it. People walk at night sometimes, maybe coming home from somewhere. But as he got closer, something about him made my stomach tighten. He was a big guy, tall and broad, wearing a sweatshirt with the hood pulled up over his head. That alone wasn't strange. But the way he moved, it was wrong. His legs were walking normally, but his upper body barely moved at all. No arm swing, no natural sway, just stiff, almost mechanical. Like his torso was locked in place while his feet carried him forward. I stopped swinging. I just watched. When he reached the stretch of road directly in front of my house, he slowed down. Then he stopped, right in the middle of the street, and turned his head toward me. Even from the porch, I could feel it, that direct stare. He didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't ask for directions. He just stood there, looking at me. The silence felt heavier by the second. I waited for him to say something, anything. Maybe he'd ask for the time. Maybe he'd pretend to be lost. But he didn't speak. After a few long seconds, without breaking eye contact, he stepped off the street and started walking up my driveway. My heart immediately started racing. I stood up from the bench. "Hey," I shouted. "Can I help you?" No response. He kept walking. "Get off my property," I yelled louder this time, my voice cracking slightly. Still nothing. He was getting closer now, close enough that I could see how deliberate his steps were, slow, controlled, like he wasn't in any hurry at all. That's when fear really kicked in. I backed toward the front door, my hand fumbling for the handle. The second I stepped inside, I slammed it shut and locked it. Then I deadbolted it for good measure. My breathing was uneven, fast. I pressed my eye to the peephole. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to the door and stopped, standing inches away from it. For a moment, he just stood there, silent. Then I saw his arm move under the sweatshirt. He reached inside and pulled something out. From the tiny fisheye view of the peephole, it was hard to make out clearly, but it looked heavy, metallic, maybe a hammer or a crowbar. Something solid, something meant to break things. My stomach dropped. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I turned and ran upstairs as quietly and quickly as I could, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it through the walls. I rushed into my bedroom, locked the door, and grabbed my phone. With shaking hands, I dialed 911. And as the line started ringing, I held my breath, terrified of hearing the sound of metal hitting wood downstairs. As I was whispering to the 911 operator, trying not to completely lose it, I heard it. The first strike. A heavy crack echoed from downstairs, wood splitting under pressure. My whole body tensed. Then another hit, and another, each one louder than the last. I could practically hear pieces of the door frame tearing apart. "Please hurry," I kept saying into the phone, my voice shaking. "He's breaking in. He's breaking the door." Then came a final violent thud. And suddenly, silence. Not normal silence, the kind that feels wrong. The operator kept talking to me, but I could barely hear her over the ringing in my ears. Downstairs, the only sound was the faint creaking of what I assumed was the shattered door hanging crooked on its hinges. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, staring at my locked bedroom door. I fully expected to hear footsteps on the stairs at any second. Slow, deliberate, coming for me. But nothing came. 5 seconds passed. 10, 30. Every second stretched painfully long. I imagined him standing at the bottom of the stairs, listening, waiting, maybe even smiling. Then finally, in the distance, I heard it. A siren. Not blaring loudly. Just that quick, sharp chirp as a squad car pulled into my driveway. Relief hit me so fast it almost made me dizzy. I stood up, ready to run downstairs toward the officers, but the operator's voice cut through the phone. "Stay where you are. Do not leave the room. The officers will come to you." So I forced myself to sit back down. Those next 30 seconds were unbearable. Then I heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. Fast, purposeful. and then yelling, "Police, get on the ground." Before I could even process it, there was a loud electrical snap, the unmistakable crack of a taser firing. A man shouted in pain. My heart was slamming against my ribs. A moment later, someone knocked on my bedroom door and identified themselves as an officer. Only then did I unlock it. What they told me next still gives me chills. The guy hadn't been downstairs rummaging around. He hadn't been trying to run. He had been standing right outside my bedroom door. Just standing there, silent, as if he was waiting for me to open it myself, waiting for me to step out. They arrested him on the spot. Apparently, he was extremely drunk. That's the explanation I was given. But being drunk doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why he walked straight to my house, why he stared at me from the street, why he pulled out a tool to break down my door, why he stopped outside my bedroom instead of trying to escape when the police arrived. The officers told me he wouldn't even answer basic questions. He wouldn't explain why he was on that road, wouldn't explain why he chose my house, wouldn't explain what he planned to do. To this day, I don't know who he was. I don't know if it was random or if I was specifically targeted. All I know is this: if I had opened that bedroom door, if I had tried to confront him, if I had been even a little bit braver or a little bit more curious, I probably wouldn't be here telling this story.